inviting the speakers of the panel, Gamze, Karslı, and Arda Çırpılı will be with us. Gamze Karslı is Marketing Director for the Security Events Organizations, and Arda Çırpılı is the Senior Information Security Consultant, including KVKK and GDPR. They will be talking about the data privacy and safety of information. Now I'm inviting them to the floor.
Hoş geldiniz.
Welcome,
Arda Hanım. Nasılsınız?
Gamze and Arda. How are you? We're fine,
Biz
thank you.
teşekkür
And
ederiz.
what about you?
Uygun olduğunuzda
Thank
başlayabiliriz.
you. We can
Hazırsanız
start our
ben
panel
sözü
when you
zaten
are ready. I am
istediğiniz gibi
here.
ilerleyebiliriz. Yaklaşık bir 50 dakika
We can
süremiz var.
proceed as you like. We have 50 minutes. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for your invitation, especially about the data privacy. At the side of the game, we have this opportunity about, and this is quite important. I hope that the second event will be the way for the future. It's really enjoyable. My name is Gamze Karslı. I will also mention that at the side of the cybersecurity, I'm a product manager. For nearly 3 years, I'm in cybersecurity sector. Together with the Gaming Istanbul team, I also had an experience in games, and previously I was dealing with e-commerce. And now I'm at the side of the security, and for two different products, I am the marketer. Now, Arda. Hi, everyone. My name is Arda Çırpılı. During the university years in the structure of Middle East Technical University, there was a game in game company. I was started as an intern there, and then the sector and my career preferences brought me here. And now, upon data security, I'm working, and sometimes we encounter with Gamze from time to time in our business life. And actually, when and I hope that this presentation will be quite used, and I think we will start together with Gamze, and we will be talking about what are you doing with all these data, Gamze. Yes, the floor is yours. For nearly 2 years, at every event and activity we're facing with Arda, I am the data collector, and Arda is the regulator part. And through and on the desktop, we are really discussing. Sometimes there are long email graphics, and even a tiny detail is really important. Therefore, there are many actions to do, and all kind of details we are along with Arda. From the perspective of marketing, marketing is based on data, and I also dealt with digital marketing in the past and still using it actively. And data is everything for us. We have to collect all those data, and processing all those data and using them meaningfully is important for us. And of course, I think since 2008 with Google AdWords, we started to collect data, and I'm using it in marketing activities. But every year, actually, until 2016, it was more comfortable, and any kind of data could be used by us for advertisements, for marketing activities, for email campaigns, for remarketing, etc. But it has become more challenging with the restrictions and the regulations in time, and sometimes the platforms also brought their own restrictions, and sometimes the governments put some restrictions into effect. And day by day, the data collected uh, has become unusable in time. Actually, I do not complain about it because this is true, and true collection and true storage and management of the data is important. Therefore, we have to collect data, but briefly I can say that what are we collecting at the basic level? It is not only specific to games, but in all the marketing activities, our main purpose is to keep in touch with the target audience. Therefore, we need to access to their contact data. So, names, email addresses, age, sex, and the geography the audience lives in, and the product access data are collected. And depending on their needs, the processing of the data changes, the quality, the quantity changes. And we can start from here if you like. These are the basic data collected, and what are we doing with them? As you mentioned about the collection of data, there is no problem. You are collecting data, and while collecting the data, what are the considerations? There are regulations of the countries. Since 2016, we have a law on protection of personally. There is also a responsibility. Uh, Therefore, in, in when we look at the general data collected, there are reaching out to specific nation, actually both for the developers, both for the gamers and users. I need to ask a question. This is a recommendation actually. Do you really need that much? Do you really need that much data? As a user, I'm to sign in a game. What kind of data is required? My name, surname, cell phone, real identity. Uh, but am I really purchase something? That accordingly, I will give my credit card details, or if a recognition is required or not. Accordingly, I should then the data shall be categorized, and how they should be stored, how they should be shared. These considerations are important. And there is a legal side of this, and at the same time a technical side. Actually, really important servers and infrastructure is required, and we need to ensure the security of them as well. Actually, if you are getting the support of a third party, actually, then the security responsibilities of the third parties are also technical side. And there's another peer of this: children who want to play games. Actually, for the adults, actually, you get the approval. This is actually a different process in GDPR and law on the personal protection of the personal data. For GDPR, actually, the individuals over the age of 16 is actually considered as uh, what- as adults. However, in our country, this age group is still children. Therefore, for the children, actually, at the beginning, during signing in, actually, only the required data shall be collected. And then about the approval of children, if the children is too small provide the data, then a parent is required to give that approval. But is not something uh, feasible. Else there will be some penalties, but only it's about the penalties, but also the recognition of the company, the size of the data, the category of the data are all important.
Bunun
And
haricinde
apart from
nokta
this,
taşı riski olan kişilerin oyun oynadığını düşünelim. İşte saydığım datalar var, isim,
suppose
kimlik,
that there are adults, the name,
gibi
surname, geography, credit card information are all provided. But a game also has the right
tamamen silinmesini
that
istiyor.
I want all my data to be deleted from this platform. And if you do not provide appropriate infrastructure, then laws and you will be in conflict with the data and regulations if you don't obey what the game says. And also, this may influence the workflow of the games, and therefore there are some software corrections to be made. Actually, to sum up, do you really need that much data or not? So this must be conceptualized from the very beginning. And we are in the game, for example. What are you collecting during the game? Actually, please tell about it because it's more complex. For marketing, I'm talking about, but I'm not game developer marketing, but I assure you that in the games, of, not only for marketing, but also developing the games, we're collecting data because the developers, the designers, software developers can improve the data with these improve the game with these data, and depending on the attitudes of the gamers, uh, they collect some data and some improvements are done for improving the game. And what is included in it, any behavior of the user, even chat box text or selection of items, or the frequency of using the game, during which hours of the day the game is used. So these are the data collected. And at the side of the conformity, is there any considerations from the aspect of law? We're saying chat applications, and there are some video uses possible in some games, and some include biometrical data as well. And when it comes to biometrical data, the floor is yours, of course. And what are the considerations in this aspect? Actually, during the last years, there are some popular systems, privacy by design, it's called. Actually, while designing the games from the very beginning, the security is in the foreground, and it is advantageous compared to the competitors, and is also compliant with the regulations and laws, so that there will not be any conflict in the future. You have your shield from the beginning with this software. You can do such a planning. Actually, now the major companies invest in data protection. They're estimating their risks. Actually, at the beginning, you can focus on the most critical risks, and I also know that uh, it's difficult to integrate a security item in an already developed game. It requires manpower or time loss. Therefore, for the newly developed games, you can implement a privacy by design principle. It will be advantageous. And apart from that, you talked about the chats and some voice messages. But unfortunately, there are some examples from the past. If you do not take security precautions, then chat screens are hacked, and there are serious gains actually from those screenshots. Actually, even the virtual objects in the games
videoların vesaire ücretli olarak
are
satılması, yani bu
a
taraftan hem belli bir
setback.
kısma gidip
There's a
kullanılırken
serious
kullanılmayan, değeri olmayan
earning.
objelerin
Actually, in normal
o
world,
durumdaki
the virtual
orijinallerinde
objects are not
çok fazla
valuable, but
kullanım
for a
sağlanması
gamer, it's a real
ve
loss actually. Yes, you're right. Even for the purchases during the games, those items are empowering the characters. Actually, there is intangible and intangible investments actually because it's both
şöyle
time and money.
satın
And
alma noktasında
I
ürün
totally
satış
agree about
şirketleri
the
satın
purchases behind the SS concept is in
standartlarımızı
question.
koyuyorlar.
This is a standard actually.
Yıllık
It
belirli
ensures the security of the credit card
sorumluya
securities,
ve
and companies are actually responsible for this. And this standard also brings the serious security precautions as well. Actually, the developers do some improvement within the content of this standard, but at the side of the users, as I already mentioned at the beginning, if you do not need to purchase something, then you do not need to enter the credit card information. Then virtual credit cards is also possible, or you need to follow your flows, transaction flows in the credit cards so that you do not encounter any hacking.
başa dönüyorum. Bu
And again,
başladığımızda
I'm
sesli mesajlar,
coming towards the
sesli
beginning.
mesajların da dinlenmesi
We talked about the voice messages. Voice
bu
messages are
hakaret
also lessened or
suçu
stolen from
telefon
the banking
işlem
system to
yapmak için
the
işte
operations over our
üzerinde bir
cell
ses
phone
vardır.
lines.
Bizi sesinden tanır gibi uygulamalarımız var.
There are some
Bunlar
sound
sesli mesajların
recognition programs.
çok
Actually,
klonlanabilme özellikleri var.
can
Yani
also be
sakın
cons
demeyin
actually.
tarafından
For
klonlanabilir.
example,
Dolayısıyla
bad intentions
bunun
hacker
tavsiyesi
group can
kullanmamak.
clone
Ve
this voice,
özellikle
and
de
through the voice
işlemci
of people they can access to the banking systems with those ill intentions. Yes, actually there is a software, but what is the significance given to the part of security? Therefore, the companies need to focus on this. As I've already said, in major companies there are such structures, and there are some outsourcing to the third parties for the security. For example, in within a game, one may be directed to the other unit for the procurements during, for the purchases during the game. This is a choice. And Facebook also took some precautions lately. If you are to enter a part at the third party site, then the user is informed. Actually, there is a pop-up window saying that now you are entering a third party site with your Facebook account, and your security is not no longer under our responsibility. But at the side of the user, it's up to the choice of the user. It's no longer the responsibility of Facebook. And actually, this requires some awareness to some extent. As I've already said, now the companies are also regulating their third-party processes, and are clearly stated in the regulations in the data protection law and in GDPR. The responsible people for data is clearly specified. And I do not want to go into technical details, but especially about the free games, the only way to gain money is advertisements and provision of some data. And in some games, there are server changes And
gibi şeyler var. Bunların hepsi veri aktarımı
all
ile
of these are required
Şimdi şunu sormak istiyorum geliştiriciler
for
açısından.
data protection.
Bu verilerin sahibi geliştiriciler mi?
Evet.
The owner
İşle
of this data is developers or not.
ayrı ayrı şeyleri var, yükümlülükleri var. Onu biraz açar mısın Arda?
Tabii açarım.
And
Şöyle
all have different responsibilities.
önce burada bir anlaşalım ki veriyi toplarken hem GDPR'da hem KVKK'da hem de işte Fransa'nın
And follow GDPR and data protection law and in specific regulations about the first the method of data collection, the responsibilities are clear. About our country, I will also underline the legal parts of this. Actually, about the technical parts, we're working, but it's just for data sharing. And if you want to regulate this process, then legal consultants are required. You need to cooperate with them. As the data owner, you collected the data and you need to transfer them to the third party.
verisini üçüncü bir tarafla paylaşacağınız
And if you are going to share the data with a third party, you need to inform the user.
kişiye sağlanmış olması gerekiyor ilk başta. Sonrasında ikinci bir durumumuz var. Veri yurt içinde mi, yurt
Then
dışında mı?
there is a second problem whether the data will be transferred within the country or not, even
Even in
in
European
GDPR.
Union countries, there is a limited transfer of data, and nowadays
hiçbir
our,
ülkeye data
our
transferini
country has not been letting
Avrupalar
and
Cumhurbaşkanlığı
to transfer
açıklamasında
data in another country,
GDPR'dan
and
dolayı
in
ufak bir düzenleme
the
yapıldığı
announcement of
yönünde. Ama hali hazırda
presidency
2016'dan şu anki
since
Cumhuriyet kararına kadar
2016 until
herhangi bir
this
şekilde
time,
data aktarımına izin verilmiyor. Özel şartları var.
data
Bununla ilgili
transfer has
şartlar
not been
çok
given
kamulaştırılmış
permission,
şartlar
but
değil.
there
Yani
are
şunu
some
demek
private
istiyorum.
conditions, but
Bu
they are not
eğer
so
kişi
much
bunun aşını almışsa
applicable.
eğer
If you get the
açık
consent of another
rızadaysa
person, we
açık
call it
rızadan
open
kasıt kişinin
consent.
ıslak
So,
imza
what do we
olması
mean
ise
by this
kişiden eğer
open consent?
iznini
With its
almışsan bunu yurt
clear
dışında
signature,
kişinin
if you
düşünebiliyor
get
musun?
the permission from that
Yani
person, you can
kişi bunu
transfer its
imzalayıp
data
bize
to
bu rıza
other
setini
countries. So, can we
göstermeli
get
mi?
the
Böyle bir durum
consent
mevcut
of every
değil.
person? Of course, it's not
Bu yüzden ya da taahhütnameyle
implicable.
kişi son dönemde iki tane firmanın
And
daha
in the
eklenmesi
last period,
onaylandı kurul tarafından.
two
Şu
firms'
şekilde bu
commitments have been
süreçte gerekli
approved.
güvenlik
And
tedbirlerinin
according to the
alındığı
council, if the
noktada
necessary
sen
precautions have been
firma olarak
taken,
yurt
at that
dışına da
point, as a
transfer
firm, you can
edebilirsin. Ama
transfer your
eğer
data
bu
to
güvenlik
foreign
tedbirleri
countries.
zaten
But
kötü tedbirler
of course,
aşırı
there
aşamada
must be some
gelişen 17
security and technical
var.
measures,
Bunu
and there's a
gerçekten
list
hukuk
of
uygularken
17
ya da
articles.
hangi boyutta
Are
uyguladığın
you
şartları
applying
ortaya
this
koyuyor
list? And you
ve
should be able
sadece
to
kabul edilmesi
approve and
gerekiyor.
confirm that
Bunun
you are
üzerinde
preparing for this
müesseseken
list. And
cezalar getirdiği
there
yazılı
might
ve
be some
yapılmaya
really
devam
penal
edecek.
punishment,
Bu
and there
konuda
has been also some
ceza
legal punishment for our country.
başladılar.
And in GDPR,
Hatta
the same thing also exists.
aklıma gelmişken üçüncü
And
partiyle
also,
alakalı değil
as
ama
for
Almanya'da
the
bir
third
ceza kesildi.
parties,
Geçtiğimiz
we
dönemlerde teknik
there was a
gerekçeli.
punishment
Şu
in Germany
uzun
in terms of
süreli
the technical
boyunca
issue, the
orada
punishment for
şifreli
a
alışverişler
gaming firm.
haricinde
Why?
kişiler
Because
şifrelerini
there was
unuttukları için ciddi bir
n-
GDPR
they
cezasına
weren't using their
karşılaştı.
passwords. That's why they faced with
Dediğim
a
gibi bunun
serious
hem
GDPR
hukuk süreci
punishment.
hem de
So
teknik
there
sürecin birlikte
need to be
yürütülmesi
a
gerekiyor.
really legal
Belli bir
process, and also a technical
çerçeve
process
isteyen
should be
durumlar.
carried out.
Ama tabii
So
baktığımda şu an oyun endüstrisinde çok yüksek bir farkındalık
there is
oluyor
yeah,
maalesef.
really, actually, we
Sanıyorum
cannot experience a
cezaların
high level of
yumuşatıldığına
awareness.
geçiş
It
yapılacak
must
ya da
be
bilinçlendirilmiş
related to
cezalara
the deterring
geçiş
power
yapılacak.
of the punishment. And I hope that
Şimdi
this
orada bir aslında bir
awareness
parantez açmak
is going
istiyorum.
to be increased.
Konu GDPR,
I'd
KVKK
like
ile
to
ilgili
say
bunun
that
diğer 10-12
if you're
Temmuz'da daha
talking
işte bu özel
about
data
some
koruması ile ilgili
more data
çıkarılacak yasalar
protection
Kanada olarak
laws,
onaylanacak
it
var.
exists in New
Vesaire.
Zealand, in the US, in
Şimdi
Canada.
bunların
First
çıkarılma
of
sebebi
all,
aslında
the
tamamen
reason why these
veri toplayan
laws have been passed
işlem
is that
yapmaya kalmadı da
Evet.
they are
burayı
gathering data,
güvenlik
everybody is gathering data,
önlemlerini
and for
minimum bilgi güvenliği önlemlerine politikalarına
carrying out the
dönüştürerken
measures
senelerce
of
aslında
this
çıkartılan bir şey. Aslında hani
data
çok işte bir
security,
takım cezaları olduğu için hani insanların bir
it's
anda
not
kaygısı
only
yok
because
ama
they are afraid of punishment, but the reason why those laws have been passed is to protect the last user and also to protect the other person who is storing the data of that person. So of course nobody would like to leak the data of some other people, some private people. So you you don't want to see yourself to make yourself stolen on the internet to see that their person's data have been stolen by other sides. So I agree with you at all. In gaming, there hasn't been really a big amount of awareness, but in gaming, there are really very small teams and they are really able to make big games. But there hasn't been enough regulations in gaming. You have talked about credit cards. There are some credit cards for health, for banking. There have been some regulations, and these are really very serious regulations. But in gaming, we can't see that. And as we explore, newer studies have been coming up because the gaming firms are being taken into consideration, and there are some punishments, there are some sanctions imposed. So it's not going to be very far. So in very soon we are going to see newer regulations apart from GPT or the other things. So how are we making the characters, how we categorize and how we market this process? At the same time, from the beginning, we should be able to compete with its security together with its compatibility because we need to build the whole architecture in total. We need extra time. So while talking about those, not only for gaming, we can say that last year, averagely, the average data last year, the leaking of data, I couldn't make up the sentence, but the average punishment was 3.96 million. This is really a big amount. When compared to 4 years before, there was a 50% increase. This is really a big amount. And in GDPR, according to Business Insider, 193 million punishment was being given. And at the beginning of 2021, for Facebook to Facebook, 650 million punishment was given to Facebook. Yeah, of course, it's not good to make people afraid just because making or imposing some punishment on people, but you're also right that from the beginning, then you should need to take some safety precautions and you should proceed in that way. You were going to say something, I guess, Arda. Okay. Not only GDPR gave some punishment to Facebook, and also some other punishment were given to Facebook, and that's why Facebook has started to get some punishment inside the countries. From at the beginning in the process of design. So if you are developing a game, it's not that you should act according to the principles of each country, but if you have your own categories, if you have your own basics, then you make your own rules, and according to 27/1, if you provide these procedures, you can meet 60 or 70% of the standards. So at the beginning, you should take these safety precautions at the beginning. So I will ask you something. eh, to the teams of game developers, there might be very small teams and there might be some bigger teams as well, involving hundreds or thousands of people. So if the team is small, then funding is small, the budget is small, we can say. It's something like a startup. So I'm also coming from the original startup thing. I know what problems they have. So what should they do as a professional? What should they do? How should those small teams
Yani
can
şimdi
start up?
şöyle aslında ekibin
What do you
küçüldüğü artık
suggest?
ülkenin
So
gereği kalmış.
it's
Çünkü
not only
çalışan
about
sayısı
the
yıllık bilanço
smallness of the
üzerinden
team. So
belirlenen
it's
ya
about
da
the
faaliyet alanı
annual
işler ve
budget.
işleme olan firmalar üzerinden
And also
belirleniyor.
it's about
Bu
some
zaten bildirim
firms
bildirim
processing this
olarak
data.
bildirimler yapılmış
If
durumda şu
if
anda.
there are some
Çok fazla iş
responsibilities on
üstünde. Bakın
firms,
siz
they
mühendissiniz.
have been
Sormadınız çünkü
given
faaliyet var.
information
Pandeminin de bir sebebi
because
buydu bildiğiniz üzere.
they
Herkes
have been
evden
given
çalışıyordu
some
ama
time,
firmalara da yazılar gitti.
and
Ben
also the firms have been informed.
çalışan
According
sayısının
to
değişmediğini
KVK,
anladığımız
if
firmaysa
the number of
işte bilançoyu
working
yayınlamak
personnel is about
ya
50,
da faaliyet alanınız kişisel veri işlemekse sizi falan
or
servis
your
edecek bir
activity is within
planlaması
processing the
gerekiyor.
data, so you
Şimdi
have
geliştirici
been up to some
tarafta
responsibilities. So
bence
as for
burada
developers, in my opinion, I believe that
insan olarak
as a technical
bunlardan
person,
bağımsız olarak gerçekten
independently,
kanundan sorumluyuz ya da değiliz
if
deyip
whether
bilgilerin
we are
güvenliğini
responsible for the law or not, we
karşılaştırmalı.
should
Yani
focus
ne demek
on
istiyorum
data
aslında?
protection,
Altyapıların
data
sistemlerin
safety,
kontrollerini sağlayarak
the
sistemlerin
controlling of
güvenliğini
infrastructure
sağlayarak
systems.
gibi gibi bu bilgi güvenliğinin
We should
adımlarını
make some
minimumda yapabilecekleri
processes
kadar sağlayıp
valuable.
işe başlamalarını öneriyorum.
So I advise them to
Şöyle bir
start up like
alternatif
this. And
oluşturabilecekleri
also
için
they can
baştan
build some
outsource
safety
firmayla
protection team,
işbirliği
and
devam
also they can
edebilirler.
work together with an
Eğer
outsource firm.
inanın o outsource firmaya ya da kendi içlerinde harcadıkları efor ya da maliyete
So the effort that they have
baktığınızda
been
yarın
making,
bizim
when you look at to
başvurabilecek
these
herhangi
efforts
bir olumsuzluk durumunda ki
in a negative
maliyet ve
situation,
itibar kaybı, zaman kaybı çok daha düşük kalacaktır.
so
Benim önerim bu yönde olur.
so they should really build themselves in that way. So as a marketer, as becoming an opportunist, if we have less than 50 working personnel, and if we don't have high amounts, if we don't have enough money, we are gathering some data on the marital status. I'm gathering some data on videos. Am I subject to GDPR? But I'm not making money. And I'm sharing the data with third parties for making money. So what is the case here? Of course, the legal consultants can make the necessary separations here, but according to my experience, I can say that, especially if you are processing the personal data, you are really responsible for storing this data. They're not looking for that, for example, a firm involving 3 persons. Yeah, they're not looking for how small the firm is. Yeah, we cannot get rid of that, really. Why? Because you are really working privately. This is really so much risky. For example, what I remember is, I think around 2014 or 2015, for a firm, for an e-trade, e-commerce firm, yeah, we were launching and preparing some campaigns, and there were almost no regulations. It was about pregnancy, and those were health data, and we were not allowed to make some advertisements. But on Facebook, there wasn't such a case, and we were predicting that Facebook were delivering us, and in the data sharing that people are making. For example, if you are pregnant, how much time after there was a information that in which time she's going to deliver her baby. So we are talking about data making anonymous. So they were being involved in purchasing processes. So while processing this data, at the point of making this data anonymous, so how does it work being anonymous? Where do we use it? What I call here is in GDPR, in KVKK, get the data but minimize the data.
Aldığınız dataları da
And the data that you get
yani
should be anonymous.
işte atıyorum oyun geliştiriciler için de belki şey
For
bir
example,
avantaj
for
olabilir.
game
Satmak
developers,
istemiyorum
that
kendimi.
could be
Gerçek
an
verilerle
option for
ilgili
game
ya
developers
da
that they could
gerçek
use
bilgiler
a username, for
toplanması
example.
dışında
So they
isimleri
should
falan
keep the real
tekrar
data
edilebilir. Şimdi
in the background.
nedir anonimleştirme?
So
Aldığım ben
what's it
Indieway'a
called?
üye
Being
oldum.
anonymous. For
İşte
example,
oyuna
I
açtım.
have subscribed to a game. I gave some important
Adresleri
information. I also give my credit card details.
olduğu gibi bir yerde saklamamanız gerekiyor.
So
Ne
you should
yapmanız
not
gerekiyor? Onları
store this data in
anlaşılmayacak
only
hale
one
getirmek
position. So you
gerektiğini
should make them
söylemek
anonymous. You
gibi.
should
Yani
mask your data.
KVKK'da da
In
böyle bir
GDPR and in KVKK, there are some articles, so you step by step apply these processes. Technically, I'm talking.
anonimleştirilmiş datalarla
And
ilgili
for these
dediğim gibi
anonymized
zaten
data,
şunu
there is
söyleyeyim.
not a problem. And
Oyunda
laws tells us that
gerçek
in
kişi
GDPR and
tespit edilebilecek
KVKK, if you
şekilde
can
data
detect the real
saklarsa
persons,
problem var.
if you store the
Yani
data in
işte
that way, there's a
Türkiye
problem.
Bilgi
So what does it
tarafından
mean? So
Indieway
it's all
önünde
in
sabah
the way
konuşmasında konuşan
event. For
Gamze
example, if
yani
you are
Gamze'nin
referring to Gamze talking in the
açıklaması
way event,
yani
then tomorrow I can
bir
understand
suçu
that you are
kendisine
Gamze
isabet
Karslı.
etmeyecek şekilde saklamam
Yeah,
lazım.
I should store the data in order not to point to you. So at this point, for becoming anonymous,
Evet.
all data
Anonimleştirilmesi gerektiğinde
need to be
silinmesi
made that way.
talep
If
edilmesi
necessary, you should delete the data if demanded.
altyapıların hazır olması
So there
gerekiyor.
must be necessary infrastructure
Ülkemizde
here.
özellikle şöyle bir sıkıntı var.
Especially in our country, there's a process in our country like this.
Kişi başvuru yaptığında
The person
30 gün
applies. When the
içerisinde
person applies,
firma
within
kişiye
30
cevap
days, the
vermesi
firm
gerekiyor.
should respond to the person.
Demesi gerekiyor ki evet senin datan burada,
Okay, you
işte
have that data,
vesaire
and
vesaire.
on at
Şimdi
this
bu
date, I'm gonna
dosya
delete your data. If it is
KVKK kuruluna
after
gidiyor ve
30
şikayet
days, then it
ediliyor.
goes to the Council of
Şikayet ediliyor.
KVKK and
İnceleme
it's
başlatılıyor. İnceleme
transformed into a
başladıktan sonra işin ilginç tarafı
complaint.
şu
Then
ki
there is a process of
burada
investigation
saklama
at that
süreci
time.
yapılmıyor.
So the investigation is not for only
Sadece
that
yazılar
case,
için
also for the other
yazılar
cases the
ve
investigation process
ispatlarla
has
kararlar
started. So the
verilebiliyor.
monetary punishment has become multiplied.
Evet.
It's not only for
Ama GDPR'ın şöyle bir
GDPR but also
dezavantajlı
KVKK.
özelliği var. GDPR direkt
And
böyle
also GDPR has some other
cezasını yazıyor
principle
ama
that
işte
GDPR has
finansal
given
cironuzun
a
%4'üne
monetary
kadar
punishment,
cezasını etkiliyor
and
dolayısıyla
GDPR
bayağı büyük bir
is liable to
kavram.
make
Ama dediğim gibi
a
aslında yattığı
punishment
para
to
değil. Yani evet para bir
a
yerde
certain
ceza ödemek
limit.
zor bir durum.
So of
Peki sizin
course,
itibarınıza gelebilecek bir
your dignity is
durum
so
çünkü
important
açık
here.
verilmiş
Okay,
bir
you are paying the
bilgi
money
var.
as for in
Paranın
return
sonra
for the
tespit edeceği
punishment,
bir şey
but
var.
your dignity has been also damaged. We are on the same page with you on this matter. And while talking about storage, I don't want to enter the area of cyber safety. There could be some threats in cyber safety, and there could be some problems there because there are some ongoing processes there. Yeah, they could be hacked, and their games could be not accessible. So within all those processes, in order to manage all those processes, there must be some safety actions. While taking those actions, there must be some methodology and they should conform to the laws. So the activity logos should be stored in certain periods, etc., etc. So could you please talk about the cyber safety of this issue? Yeah, it's really a limitless area, but in short, could you please talk about those? So according to the regulations, there are some basic steps, or the data protection points to certain steps. So you're going to make some tests. The infrastructure should be strong. So these are some important concepts. Technically, the investment that you are making, so you will provide your safety and your infrastructure. Yeah, we are always underlining that. You got all technology systems, you installed every step. Are you 100% safe or secure? No. If there is human being everywhere, then there's always the weakest link. You're always the weakest link. Why? Because there are human beings everywhere. You're not 100% safe. So when you look at the investments, yeah, you can go to a certain point
bir noktaya getirmeniz,
and
taşımanız.
you can say that you have done your best.
Evet, yazılım tarafına önem veriliyor ama bu güvenlik
Yeah, software has been given importance, but some safety tests can be ignored. And unfortunately, with the data leakage, you can face. So you can that could be some very important results, unfortunately. It's the name of our event is Indieway, as you know. I'm asking these questions just because. So there are some resources in Turkey and in Turkey, so you can make use of those resources, as I know. And the budget is not so high, so within their teams they can also do that. And there must be also a third eye outside in order to make the risk assessment. They don't need to close all their risks, but there must be some step-by-step actions from the beginning till the end. While talking to you, I'm also looking at some topics. Yeah, we have mentioned mining a little bit about the data stored inside. Yeah, we have mentioned where we use them and how to store them. Yeah, being anonymous is really very functional from what you said. And of course, it should be compatible with the standards and laws in the third parties conventions. Why? Because the convention, the contract point is so important with third parties. Why? Because it's not only you, but also there is a third party. Why? Because there must be a contract between the ones processing and also the using those data. And one last question is, when you look at the contents, those laws are so close to one another. I'm a developer and my aiming country is the Philippines, the US, or Turkey. I should look at something, I guess. I should really investigate the laws. First of all, starting from our country, we should investigate our laws. So we should be able to follow our basic safety principles. So rather than the other countries, also in my country, I have provided the basic safety precautions. And if I'm transferring inside Turkey, then I should follow the Turkey's laws. And if I'm working together with the European Union, then I should investigate the laws of other European Union countries. But first of all, you should start from your own country. The awareness of your team, has it been increased or not? Have I provided the necessary infrastructure? Have I invested? Have I completed my safety tests? So with this one, you can start your job.
Korkutucu değil, amaç yani sonuçta bilinçlendirme olması gerektiğini düşünüyorum. Cezayla
Actually,
korkutulacak.
about the penalties, there must be some awareness raised. After gaining information about the information security and after ensuring the basis, then we can build upon it. I think we have covered all of the subjects. If there are any questions, we can answer them. I think there are participants. If there are any questions, we can answer the questions. Is there any?
Ben şimdi
Sardar, can we see the questions or you will ask?
Henüz soru gelmemiş. Ben önce kendim
There
bir
is no question yet, but I'm curious about one thing.
Şimdi son zamanlarda çok büyük şirketlerin
Lately, actually, major
e,
companies such as Facebook and
cezalar
Google got some
ancak
penalties. You
bu
also mentioned
cezalar
about them.
şirketlerin
And
kar
those
marjlarını
penalties
düşürüyor.
actually are not
Ve
even
bu
1% of
noktada da ben
their
başta
profit margin. And
başlangıçta
about this,
bahsettiğim
I
gibi
read an essay about the discouragement
ama
actually.
şöyle
How to discourage
güvenlik
those
açısından
major
bir
companies about the data
fazla
security?
güvenilir
More
bu
strict measures can be taken or not, and what can they be? Actually, from my personal point of view, I totally agree with you. Actually, their profit margin is quite high, but actually, each penalty is an example. I'm not a law person, but each penalty opens the way for the other one. And on the other hand, there are also some problems about the safety. Actually, Google released some information about the cookies they collected. They updated something. Actually, gradually, they are changing their cookies policy. Actually, step by step, they are giving up those cookies. Actually, advertisement is one of the major items of profits gaining for Google. And in my opinion, this is actually independent on the sanctions, but this is about the ethical part of the companies at the part of the individual data and information security. There are some precautions to be taken by them, and actually these policies are directing in a correct manner. What about you, Arda? I totally agree with you. For the Facebook example, for example, any error made within the process, it directed Facebook to regulate their relations with the third parties. Actually, when the penalty was quite lower than their profit, they had an internal regulation. Now, they are informing the users when the users are directed to third party sites, and they are actually informing the users that are no longer responsible for the data. And actually, even in Facebook, excuse me, even in Turkey, Facebook was given a penalty by the law on protection of personal data. Therefore, Facebook had to regulate their internal uh, discipline and principles. Actually, it is rather than money, it's about their
evet, teşekkürler
prestige
cevabınız için.
and image.
Başka soruları olan var mı?
Thank you very much. If there are other
Ekleyebiliriz açabilirler.
questions, our
Benim
audience can
yanıma
also write
katılabilirler.
in the chat box or Q&A. We have 5 more minutes. We can answer the questions during this time.
ben ilginç bir data gördüm.
Actually, I saw an interesting data while searching for this
2020 yılında en çok hangi
issue.
mobile mobil uygulamalar
The
arasında
most
sosyal
money
ağlarda
spent
paylaşılan
mobile app in Turkey
yer
was
alıyor.
poker and
1,3 milyon dolar
similar
olarak
games,
hesaplanıyor.
and this
Takip
the
yani
spent
asıl
amount was around $9.5 million. Actually, this is quite a serious process, a serious card flow, and this is a serious economic order. Therefore, the precautions in this part shall be improved
Evet, kesinlikle.
in the soonest possible time.
Sorumuz yok galiba.
I think there is no question answered by the audience,
o zaman soru
asked by
sorulana
the
esnek
audience.
olarak da bizlerin
Then,
sorularını
if you have any questions, you can access to us
Başta bahsetmek
anytime.
istediğim
We
bir
will
husus
try our
varsa
best to
bahsedebilirsiniz yine.
answer your questions. If there are any other issues you want to touch upon,
aldığım notlardan
I'm checking my notes by the way.
Galiba hepsini kapatmışız abi.
I think we have covered all, yes.
Evet. Hiçbir başlığımız göremiyorum ben.
There's no other title.
Katılımcılarımız da burada ama.
Participants are also all here.
Okay, o zaman evet bitirebiliriz.
Okay, then we can conclude our session. We would like to thank you very much for your participation. It was quite an informing panel.
Teşekkürler tekrar
Thank
katılımı
you
katıldığınız için.
for accepting our invitation and answering the questions. Thank you very much and good
Çok
luck.
teşekkürler.
Thank you.
Görüşmek üzere.
See you.